Let's say you wake up on your birthday and you have gone back to the age you chose. I would go back to 13. Until that point, my life was mostly uneventful, aside from being affected by abuse from my parents. 13 was around the time my life started becoming really interesting. I was a very intelligent kid, but it seemed like my intelligence was closely linked to my mental state. 13 is just before depression fully set in. I remember getting hundreds on every test I took. If I had continued on that path instead of being consumed by my mental health challenges, I could probably have graduated with highest honors or at least high honors. 13 is 2 years after I dealt with all of my bullies, but things at home were still problematic. I would go back to figure out some way to fix all of that. Story 1. Probably any point where all this information would make sense, so about 10-2, or enough to buy me some Bitcoin before it exploded. Story 2. Honestly, I would probably go back to the age of 11. There are so many things I would do differently. Story 3. I would go back to 8 years old. I would hug my father every day and hang on his every word because I would know he would die when I was 10. Story 4. As much as I would love to know, even with the knowledge I have now, I would hate to relive the difficult times that were my life. In fact, with the memories and knowledge I have now, it would be even more torturous. Story 5. Just in time to avoid my first marriage and skip moving somewhere I did not want to live, but done with my education and established in my career. Story 6. Age 8, maybe 10. I was getting bullied and then did the same to younger kids. I know how to stop a bully now, and I know to be kinder to everyone. This would have changed my high school experience. Story 7. Around 10 years. I would keep my life path similar but correct many mistakes and receive treatment for attention deficit hyperactivity disorder early. Story 8. 2 years old. Basically the age when I started speaking in full sentences. I would smack the cigarettes out of my dad's hand and hope that stopping 13 years earlier would prevent lung cancer. Story 9. 13 sounds like a crucial turning point. It is powerful that you can pinpoint where things shifted. Most people never get that clarity. Even if we cannot go back, this kind of self-awareness is a win in itself. Thank you for sharing. Story 10. There were many things that I could have avoided at a young age. I would not have needed years of speech therapy, and I would be able to watch Who Framed Roger Rabbit in theaters again. Story 11. As someone who was diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder at 30, I would say 18 is the right age to get a diagnosis. College would not have been as difficult, nor would I have wasted so much time. Story 12-18. What would I do differently? I would spend the years between 18 and 25 fully focused on myself. Fitness, wealth building, personal development, upskilling, travel, ticking some items off my bucket list, and not worrying about what other people were doing or conforming to any societal or parental expectations. Story 13. I would go back to 2012. I would tell my father to invest as much money as he possibly could into Netflix. Back then, the stock cost around $10 to $20. Now, it is over $1,000. We would have a lot of money if we had done that. Story 14. The only things I would change are phrases like, buy Apple stock, or Bitcoin is modern art. Invest when you can. These ideas did not come to fruition until recently. The question is, do I want to go through everything again for it? If I did, would the changes to my finances affect my decisions? In short, would I even be happily married and have this family? We are struggling now, but would it be worth it? Story 15-13, going back to a specific mathematics class where I fell asleep, would turn my life around so much. Not that I do not like my life, but I could do so much better. Story 16, about 10, that's when things started happening to me that had large negative impacts on me. But that's only if artificial intelligence was forced to do this. I would rather just stay here and now. The past handful of years is the first time I have felt comfortable in my personal life. Story 17. In 2009 and 2010, when Bitcoin was worth close to nothing, I was 13 or 14 years old. I spent all my school money on it and would have billions now. I would probably also be the smartest kid in class. Story 18. I would go back to age 9 just before my parents got divorced. Not to prevent it, but to help my mother come out of the closet more easily and safely. She took some dangerous risks trying to find who she was, and it took its toll. I would also help my father get over it, move on, and possibly find a better second wife than he did. If not, I would have the emotional maturity to help him fix his second marriage or to get out of her orbit sooner. She was not a terrible person, but she reacted poorly to a difficult situation and became one. I think that could be prevented. Even knowing what religion is and why it exists, I think I would get saved young and use it for networking, maybe get into politics. I would know when to invest in Apple to get rich, and maybe I could fix things from within. Story 19. I would not change any action before that. I did pretty well. A university do-over would be good, though. Story 20. Summer after 6th grade. Summer camp was amazing that year. I met a bunch of new friends the next year at school, and I had a chance to be with my high school crush again. Going back any younger would be strange. Having the sex drive of an adult as a toddler would be unusual. Story 21. I am almost 48 years old now. I would go back 30 years to when I was just starting college. I am in healthcare and I love it, but I would go back and do something with computers and technology because it has grown significantly since then. Story 22. Age 5, right when I was going into 1st grade. I could have made my mother's life a lot easier if I had done things like chores and homework. Story 23. Right after my youngest sister was born, I would go back further, but doing so could risk either of my siblings not being born. I would love an opportunity to redo things in my life with the knowledge I now have. Story 24. Limited by what I could do at that age. Freshman year in high school when I was 15. I would have made the friends I wanted to make but was too afraid to. Story 25. I would choose when I just turned 22. I was in a comfortable spot with many challenges ahead that I was too afraid to accomplish. I knew I could do it and I regret not doing it. Story 26. There are things I regret, and my life was hard for the first 25 years, but changing anything about it might change how I ended up. Married to a wonderful wife with 2 awesome boys. I would never do that. Story 27. We bought the very first iMac model Apple made. I was so enamored with it that I wanted to switch all my existing stock I had been gifted as a baby to Apple, but I was too scared to ask my dad. If I had done that, I would be in a massively different financial position. That and Bitcoin. I would be set for life at this point. Otherwise, my life is pretty decent and I do not need to change much. Story 28. To make better use of my last couple of years in high school and in college and make a few better decisions in my late teens and early 20s. Story 29. Easy. At the end of 2001, I will convince my parents to place a bet on the Los Angeles Dodgers to go on a 20-game winning streak, which will have incredible odds. I will take that money and short the housing market. I will cash out on the credit default swaps around 2008 to 2009 and put half into Bitcoin while it is still worth pennies in 2010. I will pull some out in 2017 to pay off my student loans and invest more money into Tesla and Nvidia. By the end of 2022, I should be a multimillionaire, if not a billionaire. Tada! Now I am in my mid-20s and can just enjoy life. This assumes everything repeats without any changes. Story 30. I'll go back to 13 or 14 years old. I was bullied in high school and I dropped out before completing it. Now I am aware that I need to be more confident, stand up for myself, and so on. Story 31. September 14th, 2015. I was 17 and just starting college. I would have done my best to graduate early. I would have started losing weight. I would spend more time with my grandmother. I would have stuck with piano. Story 32. It's easy to say yes, but I fear the butterfly effect and somehow not meeting my wife when I was supposed to, or maybe something would have kept us from having our amazing daughter. It would have to be somewhere in the window where she exists. If I limit it to those 8 or so years, I feel like my career got me to the point where I have the friends I have and a job I enjoy. Even if we struggle to pay the bills sometimes, I don't think it's worth hitting a reset button and possibly ending up in a worse position. Story 33. I would say 18, but to be honest, by 22, I was really settled and happy in my relationship. I would not risk messing that up. That would be roughly 2019. I could still ride a massive cryptocurrency wave and the GameStop pump, followed by Nvidia. Money is the only thing holding me back in life. I would try to keep most other things the same. I would also take a vitamin D supplement. Story 34. Oh man, I have thought about this one a lot. Short answer, I wouldn't go back more than about a week. Even then, that could be very dangerous. Longer answer, like many, I have had some bad things happen in my life. I am an older man. The easy answer is that I would go back right before these events and prevent them from happening. That would be decades ago, and of course I could be very rich now with investments well beyond what I am now. There are some huge problems, though. First, the bad things that happened to me changed me to be very driven and to strive for success on my own. This new version wouldn't have that suffering happen. Yes, I would remember it, but I would not go through it again, so this new me would have memories of what didn't happen. Weird. Also, I wouldn't have the satisfaction of making it on my own. Next, and this is the huge one, how do I end up meeting my wife now? Because of my hardship, I met some great people, including my wife. Even if I somehow managed to meet her again, what about our son? Probably no wife, no son, no great friends, thus a horrible life. That, to be honest, sounds like hell to me. Yes, being incredibly rich from investments, but so hollow. No real friends who are true friends, and not just friends because I am rich. So, in short, it would probably be like 2 or 3 days. I would, of course, see what stocks and investments I could leverage and what sporting events I could bet on. But even then, I would be very nervous about what has changed. I might be wealthier, but others might figure out that I made all the right decisions in one day, which could cause problems in my life. Story 35. Just let me start over. I miss bonding with my parents as a child and feel like I did not show my appreciation as much as I should have. I definitely do now, but I miss those moments from childhood very much. Story 36. 9 or 10, and I would demand that they give me a scarlet fever vaccine. Then again, if I went back in time, I would have to relive 2020 and 2025. That would be unpleasant. Story 37. My childhood and teenage years were mostly good. I would go back to age 18 or 19. I began battling depression a little over a year later, but it took another year to understand that it was depression. My grades at university declined. My vision for the future was just going day by day, or else I would erase myself from existence. At least I found solace in discovering an area of interest that is now everywhere, but I should have taken it more seriously back then. I would have been able to study abroad for 1 or 2 years, but in this current timeline, I had to take care of my family, who was well cared for. That being said, these misfortunes and other stumbles along the way have made me who I am. They also led me to find my fiancée. She is great, the love of my life. I would search for her everywhere if I had lived a different life. Story 38. I wouldn't. Yes, there are many points where things went wrong in relationships or otherwise, but I have 3 amazing kids I wouldn't trade for anything. Any significant change in the past would have put me on a different path where they do not exist. That said, I wish I had prioritized saving for retirement earlier in my career. My first professional job did not have a retirement savings plan or the like, but I could have put money in an individual retirement account. My second job had a pension I was counting on, but it was ultimately frozen during the 2008 financial crisis. Money was tight then, with 1 income, a wife, and a child at home, so I could not afford to save and pay the bills. I was, in my mid-30s before I really started trying in earnest. I am fortunate, I realize. The generation after me probably has even less opportunity because wages stagnate and basic costs increase. Story 39. The earliest date when I am able to function as a semi-independent person. I would have no problem with my parents paying for food and driving me around, but I would like to be able to take care of myself. With the tremendous amount of free time I would have, I would learn many more things. Story 40. 17. Invest in my partner earlier and jumpstart the work I am doing now with a more focused worldview. Story 41. That's a tough call. There are things I would love to change, but changing those means I would not have my kids, and that is a terrible thought. It also means I would not be married to my current wife, and that too is a terrible thought. I guess maybe just go back far enough to live my life over again, but with different, better jobs and invest in the companies I know turn out to be good investments. I would also take better care of myself. Story 42. If I could, I would have tried harder in my last year of university around 2013, rather than being burnt out and just willing to get by. Otherwise, I really enjoy my life right now. I do think that if things hadn't happened, I wouldn't be where I am. Story 43. I know what has happened in my life, but I could not imagine a world without my sons. So I am just using my knowledge to improve my life from this point. If I could receive some of this wisdom when I was 20, things would be excellent. Story 44. Last week, I checked this week's Mega Millions numbers. I am not trying to redo my life, but moving forward and never worrying about money again would be pretty cool. Story 45. Let's get a solid redo on junior high school and onwards. Hit those books and athletics hard, and spend less time worrying about social matters that ultimately mean nothing in the grand scheme of things. Story 46. The earliest date would be June 2011 to ensure all of my children are born and are 36 years old. Then I would make some very critical career, family, and investment decisions. Story 47. Summer at 92. Done with high school, got a girlfriend, truly one of the top moments of my life. I would do my best not to ruin it with what I know now. Story 48. I would go back to age 17 before I met my first wife. Not to say I would not have dated her. I might have. But part of me is curious how different we would have been if I had not been so codependent and weak, and if she, as a disabled codependent who became an alcoholic, had not talked down to me the entire time. Story 49. At 9 years old, my dad was about to go to jail for several years. He asked if I wanted to live in Georgia with my aunts and uncles in the suburbs instead of the Bronx. I agreed to make him happy because he wanted the best for me. The feeling was that my mom wouldn't be able to handle raising a boy. But if I could do it over, I would have stayed. I had a younger sister who I left. She needed me. I feel like I could have figured life out. Story 50. I would not restart. I have had plenty thus far, and I am happy to be where I am currently and where I am headed in the future. Story 51. 11th grade, middle school, family issues, getting in shape while it is easiest, dating with the confidence that comes with age, personal issues, higher education choices. Alas, just another unrealistic hope on Reddit. Story 52. Probably 14. That's when I started getting into drugs. If I had just known, I feel like things might be different. Story 53. Should have traveled to Europe and worked there for a while not long after school, around 19 or 20 years old. Was reasonably good with languages, particularly German. Life might have gone differently with a couple of extra languages. No money and health problems prevented that. Story 54. If I could have communicated to my doctor that I was bipolar, not anxious, before it reached the point where I was in the emergency room trying to bite people, I believe I would have experienced much less suffering in my life. Story 55. 17 for sure. Old enough to find maturity in some conversations. Apply to different colleges and take it more seriously at the beginning so I do not have to start over to finish college and then go from there. Be smart with my money early on as a teenager and young adult. Story 56. I have thought about this a lot. It would probably be either the summer before sophomore year of high school or freshman year of college. I have attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. The ideal is to go back to a point where I could get a diagnosis and most meaningfully alter the trajectory. Before 6th grade, I had great grades. There was no chance I would actually get a diagnosis. In 9th grade, I was expelled from my international baccalaureate school because my grades were poor. After that, I could likely get a diagnosis and improve my grades enough to attend a better university, maybe even on scholarship. The question is whether I can convince my parents that something is wrong. If that fails, I will wait until I am 18 and can advocate for myself. I could have gone to community college for 2 years, transferred, and saved a lot of money while getting a diagnosis so I can manage my attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and still have a chance to enjoy college. I could also have more intentionally developed the social skills I have today. Story 57. September 2019. I would have invested $7,000 in Tesla call options at the 450 strike price expiring in late January. My children had been born. COVID-19 had not started, and I would have been a millionaire. Story 58. Even going back a decade, I could make a staggering amount of money with the knowledge of what has happened in the stock market and the sports world. Imagine going back to August of 2015 and putting $10,000 on Leicester City to win the Premier League at 5,000 to 1 odds. Another example would be betting against Purdue in March Madness, the season they became the first ever number 1 seed to lose their opening game to a number 16 seed. Story 59. At 17 or 18, I would have made much better financial decisions, avoided drugs, probably saved a life or two, and avoided 2 terrible relationships. I would have also invested early in Bitcoin or something similar and held on to it until I had enough to retire. I do not know if I would risk jeopardizing what I have now to fix past mistakes at this point. If I could change one thing, I know what it would be, but I could not endure the misery of the following years again, and I look forward to many years with the person I am dating now. Story 60. I am 23 years old now. I apparently forgot how to smile for at least 16 years and missed out on so much fun. I would not go back right now though. Hopefully soon. Story 61. Yeah, early teens. So many things I would do differently, like floss daily and get my teeth cleaned twice a year. It sounds mundane, but having to get periodontal surgery is brutal. Story 62. A question I have often daydreamed about is whether I would go back to either age 22, just before I started college, or just after my son was born. I have had my share of heartache, much of it related to his mother, but I don't think I could return to a time before my son was born while carrying memories of him. He is my whole world. On the other hand, after much heartache and some tough life lessons, I reconnected with someone I met briefly in college through mutual friends, and it developed into something much more. I am now happier than I have ever been in my life. It is not simply because of being with her, but she amplifies what was already there. A part of me wants to go back to the moment we met and try to start our relationship from there. However, we have both considered this and wonder if we would appreciate each other as much without knowing the future events. We acknowledge that part of what makes our relationship great is understanding how much better it is compared to what we have experienced in the past. Story 63. I would go back to 18. That was the crossroads when I started making choices based on pressure instead of purpose. With what I know now, I would avoid debt, focus on real-world skills, and take mental health seriously. I would set boundaries, stop living for other people, and actually build the life I wanted, not the one I thought I was supposed to chase. 18 is young enough to start fresh and old enough to do it right. Story 64. I would go back to my 14-year-old self and follow through with all my plans. I would honestly be unstoppable by the time I reached 23, which is my current age. Story 65. Go back to 2017 when I started college and begin making changes. Not much could have been changed before then that would have made a difference. Story 66. At 17, I would love to meet my wife again and see how much quicker I could get her to fall for me, knowing everything I know now. Story 67. In my mid-20s before I lost my wife, I assumed I couldn't change history except through my actions and decisions. I would have done things differently. I would have retired after my first initial public offering and spent more time with my wife and daughter. I wouldn't have spent as much time escaping the pain of her loss by working too much. I would have been a better father in those years after my wife died. It is my biggest regret that I was not there as much as I could have been when she needed me the most. I would still end up as good or better than I am now since I have knowledge of major market events. I could still position myself to meet my current wife, and she fell in love with me because of who I am now, and that would not change. Story 68. I'd go back to about 12 years old and change everything about the last 20 years of my life. Pay attention in school. Stay in school. Do not spend a decade in fast food. Story 69. A living man is blind and drinks his drop. What matters if the ditches are impure? What matters if I live it all once more? Endure that toil of growing up, the ignominy of boyhood, the distress of boyhood changing into manhood, the unfinished man and his pain, brought face to face with his own clumsiness. I am content to live it all again, and yet again if it be life to pitch, into the frog spawn of a blind man's ditch, a blind man battering blind men, or into that most fertile ditch of all, the folly that man does, or must suffer if he woos, A proud woman not kindred of his soul. I am content to follow to its source. Every event in action or in thought. Measure the lot. Forgive myself the lot. When such as I cast out remorse. So great a sweetness flows into the breast. We must laugh and we must sing. We are blessed by everything. Everything we look upon is blessed. Story 70. I am going to be 35 soon. Still young, but also old by some standards. I have contemplated this question a lot, but do not have a great answer. I have also heard that the best answer is to imagine you are 90 and offered the opportunity to return to today and relive your life. Live your life like you are reliving it. Make the hard decisions. Make the tough choices. Stand up for yourself and do what you want. That being said, I would probably go back to October 26, 2016. I had just moved and was going to start a new job the following Monday. I would use the opportunity to have a relationship with my ex again. I would avoid my now wife. Even though it means not having my son, I just cannot do that over again. I would eat healthier, exercise better, avoid the shoulder injury that has been nagging me for years, drink less, smile more, spend less money except on hosting so I can avoid my terrible living arrangement. Story 71. I honestly would not want to go back because I like my life as it is now. I also do not think I could go from approaching 30 with a wife and a career back to being told what my bedtime is. Story 72. 20. The start of my studies. Not much I would change honestly, but I would be far more active in certain respects. Story 73. Freshman year of high school. Lift weights. Move quickly to obtain a driver's license. Work a part-time or full-time job outside of school. Learn Python and Java. Attend a local community college and then a local university if needed to earn a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science. Consider becoming an officer in the United States Air Force. Pay off college debt faster by taking a more affordable route. Enter the technology industry and earn a good income. Senior year of high school. Lift weights. Sign a 4-year contract with the United States Air Force. Continue learning Python and Java. Attend a local community college and then a local university to earn a Bachelor of Science in Computer Science. Enter the technology industry and earn a good income without college debt. Story 74. I'm not sure I would. On one hand, I think I would have an amazing life going back to when I was young, but I would also lose all my current friends, which would be devastating. Story 75. I am going to say 50. By then, it was clear my marriage was no longer good for either of us. My life is much better now that it is over. I wish I had ended it earlier. Story 76. I would not. It is nice to think, but I have made too many memories with my child. To think that those memories are all gone from their memory would cause too much pain. Story 77. Probably right after 8th grade graduation. I have no interest in being younger than that, but high school was a decent enough time. Having the knowledge I do now would have led me down an entirely different path. I would have hung out with many of the same friends, skipped others, and probably started a business. Story 78. At 16, I dropped out of high school and worked full-time at my fast food job. I joined the United States Postal Service and said I had a diploma. I bought Bitcoin for about $10. Then, in early February 2020, I invested in put options that expired in the last week of March. Then I won in life. Story 79. I get 6 more years with my mother, fix things I did when I was 16 to 22 that made my career path difficult, and get together with my soon-to-be wife earlier in life. Story 80. 16th birthday. I would make the most of the remaining 1 year and 11.5 months of my mother's life, making it the best experience. I would spend the following 6 months making the most of the time left with my grandmother and grandfather. Maybe better career choices, and that would be it. I would do everything else exactly the same. I just wish I knew I had more time with family above all else. Story 81. I would go back to the age of 18, which is cool because I would already be with my wife. I would then bet on every major sports game and invest in cryptocurrency very early and become rich. Story 82. Maybe around 22 to 23. At that age, I have a decent shot at convincing my grandfather to get checked for pancreatic cancer. If not, then I would at least get more time with him. He was a pack-a-day smoker for most of his life. Cancer was going to get him one way or another. I just would have liked a bit more time with him. Plus, at that age, Bitcoin had just come down from its first massive spike, and the GameStop boom was still coming. I would be decently positioned to make solid money on both of those. Then, probably in early 2022, I get on my mom's case about getting screened for breast cancer. Hopefully, she has an easier time if it is caught a bit earlier and has a lower risk of recurrence. Then I make sure I am on Bumble in early 2023 so that I can match with the woman I am planning on marrying. It might be tricky to pretend that I am not already in love with her, but it would be worth it. Plus, I can probably complete my qualification quicker than I did this time around and be on better money, which, combined with what I got from Bitcoin and a couple of stock market picks that I could have gone harder on, would put me in a much better financial position. I guess it helps that I am basically just looking to improve a few things here and there while keeping the broad strokes of my life on track. Story 83. Between ages 13 and 15, I behaved a little strangely in my early teens, which led to me being bullied. It would be interesting to go back and see if I would do better now that I am more socially competent. Story 84. 3. That way I can relive those memories with the emotional capacity of an adult and just enjoy them. Story 85. I would go to my first choice of university and the program I wanted instead of my second choice because that is where all my friends went. Story 86. Probably 18. I made mistakes around that time that had lasting effects. I would not do that again. Life got the best of me, and if I had a do-over, I know that I would not do that to myself knowing what I know now. That said, I believe wisdom comes from experiencing life's lessons. Having a multitude of experiences and the winding path of my life has brought me so much perspective, personal reflection, and growth. I am blessed to be stressed. I never thought that this would be my life. I would not have met my wife on any other path. I am so grateful. Story 87. 3 or 4. If I had the knowledge I have now, I would avoid many mistakes like not investing properly from a younger age, not taking more risks, and much more. Story 88. At 13 in middle school, I made most of the mistakes in my life that still affect me today. At 21, right after military boot camp, the memories are great, but it was definitely a hard time. Story 89. 16. That is when my poor choices in relationships began. I would recognize my chronic people-pleasing and resist the urge to do it in every situation I find myself in. I would make better choices for myself, not to please someone else. Story 90. At 19, I would change my major subject at the university, move to live in another city, and say no to many people. However, that would not make sense because those choices at 19 years old would have shaped a completely different person, and I would not be me now. Story 91. So I can preempt a lot of the trauma I have endured and spend more time with those I have lost along the way. Story 92. I would go back to about a week after my child was born, shortly after my 23rd birthday in 2008. I would not want to go any further back because, while there are some decisions and choices I would love to change, I would not want to risk anything altering the outcome of who my child is. Also, frankly, I feel like convincing my wife to be with me and marry me was like some kind of magic Dungeons and Dragons dice roll where I got a natural 20 and she rolled a 1. Seriously, I am punching way above my weight grade there. But going back to that point in time, I was early enough in my sales career, although I have learned a lot since then, that I think I could perform substantially better and make a lot more money. Also, this was 2008, well before Bitcoin exploded in price, so I could buy a large amount of that, along with some other financial moves that would pay off really well. Story 93. I would say around the time I entered high school. I would take better care of my teeth, which is one of my biggest failings next to correcting my attitude in school to actually apply myself. I would push myself to get into information technology early when it is easier and make more consistent money. This would allow me to better take care of my parents given the events that happened, assuming no butterfly effect. The biggest concern would be potentially never meeting the friends I have made along the way who have helped me mentally and emotionally. Story 94. Grade school, because I want to put all those children who were mean to me in their place and appreciate more those who were kind. Story 95. With 17 years of knowledge, I would have approached personal finances and romantic relationships, including sex, differently. I would have chosen a trade that I truly wanted instead of one I needed. Now, I am working at the bare minimum in a job that just keeps me sheltered and fed. If I could go back and fix it, I would be successful in a job that I love. So successful that I would be in a higher management role or even have my own business employing people. My sexual experiences would have been memorable and meaningful. My net worth would have reached 1 million by now. I would probably be happily married, sharing a home with my spouse. We would be traveling and having fun together until one of us passed away, seeing places like France, Japan, and Northern Atlantic Europe. It would have been a beautiful life and a touching story like the Pixar movie Up. Instead, I am a miserable, divorced older millennial sharing a small room with communal roommates, plagued by memories of bitter relationships, abortions, and miscarriages. I am basically living in a pod, waiting for my ration of bugs. Thank you for making me reassess the state of my life. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.